From lake to ocean, the river flows 750 miles. From Lake Ontario to the Atlantic Ocean, 750 miles. It flows past the French-Canadian cities of Montreal and Quebec City. It flows past towns and villages along the Gaspé Peninsula. It winds its way past the half-water, half-land of the Thousand Islands. For 100 miles, it is the boundary between the state of New York and the province of Ontario. For the rest of its journey, it flows northeast through the province of Quebec. The river is also part of a far-reaching seaway system that has given North America its fourth seacoast. The river is the St. Lawrence. Wide and majestic, it's the international gateway to the Great Lakes and Canada's superhighway to the sea. Unlike most rivers which begin in wilderness and flow toward civilization, the St. Lawrence begins in civilization and flows toward wilderness. The Gulf of St. Lawrence. Here the river empties into the Atlantic Ocean. Here the river opens into a wide estuary 90 miles across. In appearance, more like a bay than a river. The southern shore curves along the Gaspé Peninsula, a rugged, untamed wilderness, sometimes called the Other Canada. Curving into the Gulf of St. Lawrence, the shoreline is punctuated with colorful lighthouses and picturesque villages. At the tip of the Gaspé, the once isolated fishing village of Persay is now a popular tourist attraction. Looming offshore like a giant ship at anchor, Persay Rock has become a landmark of the peninsula. Low tide gives visitors access to this massive shaft of limestone. The Gaspé Peninsula is the northernmost extension of the Appalachian Mountains. Gaspé comes from an Indian word which means land's end. But for the first explorers crossing the ocean, it was land's beginning. In 1534, Jacques Cartier came ashore and claimed this place and everything beyond for the King of France. Of course, in so doing, he completely ignored the land rights of those people already living there. A year later, Cartier returned and discovered a large river flowing into the Gulf. It was August 10th, St. Lawrence's feast day, so he named both Gulf and river St. Lawrence. In 1608, another French explorer, Samuel de Champlain, sailed upriver. At a place where the river narrowed, he established a settlement and fur trading post. He named it Quebec, after the Indian word which meant the river narrows here. For the French, it was the beginning of a fur trading industry that lasted over 200 years. Forts were built around the Great Lakes and far into the interior. Trapped by Indians and transported by French voyagers, animal pelts were sold by merchants on the St. Lawrence to merchants in Europe. Quebec, the old fur trading post, is now Quebec City, capital of the province of Quebec. And Quebec is the largest province in Canada. Both city and province are French in language and culture, but their history is French and English. The history up until 1759 was mostly French. In 1759, during the French and Indian War, English soldiers attacked Quebec City. Above the river, beyond city walls, on the plains of Abraham, the two armies met. A monument at the battle site honors the two commanding generals. Both Montcalm and Wolfe were fatally wounded during the intense fighting. The English victory led to the Treaty of Paris in 1763. The Treaty of Paris formally ended the colony of New France and gave England the entire eastern half of the continent. This lasted until the American Revolution, until 1783, when another Treaty of Paris gave the United States the southern part of England's North American empire. England retained Canada. England retained the province of Quebec. But the French stayed and multiplied, keeping their language and culture, and keeping Quebec an island of French in a sea of English. In Quebec City, a stately hotel rises above the St. Lawrence. Chateau Frontenac. Completed in 1893, its regal, old-world appearance has made it one of the most photographed buildings in Canada. For the people of Quebec City, winter is not an enemy, it is a friend. Each February, hearty revelers spend 10 days celebrating snow and ice. It's 10 days of festive frolic, known as the Quebec Winter Carnival. On the final day, the big event is the canoe race across the St. Lawrence. Across and back. In a classic confrontation of man and the elements, contestants must paddle and push their way through 2 miles of ice and treacherous current. Misjudging ice or current often results in a quick trip downriver and a slow trip back. Quebec City, founded 1608. Montreal, 1642. Montreal, built on an island in the river. Montreal, built on a mountain named Mont Royal by Jacques Cartier. Montreal is the English pronunciation of Mont Royal. It's the second largest French-speaking city in the world. French in speech, Catholic in worship. For towns and villages on the St. Lawrence, the Catholic Church is the dominant feature. During winter months, icebreakers keep the shipping lanes open to Montreal. This big city on the St. Lawrence is a year-round seaport hosting ships from all over the world. Montreal's location was determined by the Lachine Rapids. Ships could not navigate these swift rapids. Hoping to find a northwest passage to China, Jacques Cartier named them Sous Lachine, the Chinese Rapids. The first canal around these rapids was completed in 1824. It was the first effort to open up an inland navigation route. It was the beginning of the St. Lawrence Seaway. The final effort began in 1954. The objective was to make the channel big enough to accommodate the large ocean-going ships, which in turn would open up the Great Lakes to international trade and commerce. After years of negotiation between Canada and the United States, work began. St. Lambert, Côte St. Catherine, Lower and Upper Beauharnois, Snell, Eisenhower, Iroquois. 7 locks. 5 would be built by Canada, 2 by the United States. Working summer and winter, working day and night, it took 5 years. 5 years of removing mountains of dirt and rock. Five years of pouring mountains of concrete. Five years of blasting and dredging. Channels were deepened, bridges modified. Rapids disappeared under man-made lakes. Islands were removed, restructured, or rebuilt. "38,000 acres of land were flooded. More than 6,000 people and several communities had to be relocated. Control dams, power plants and hydroelectric dams were also a part of this mammoth project. After 5 years of international cooperation, after 5 years of continuous construction, the big ships from all over the world had access to the heartland of North America. Crossing the Atlantic, these ships have the shortest route to Rotterdam, entrance to the Rhine, and one of the busiest seaports in the world. By strict definition, the St. Lawrence Seaway begins at Montreal and extends through the Welland Canal. The Welland Canal bypasses the Niagara River and Niagara Falls. Canadian winters limit navigation to about 9 months, from early April to mid-December. Lake Ontario at one end, the Atlantic Ocean at the other. The result is a stable river, never shifting, never flooding. An ideal waterway for ships, cargo, and port facilities. An ideal waterway for industry, agriculture, and fishing. But the St. Lawrence is more than a river of trade and commerce. It is a river of considerable natural beauty. Leaving the deep waters of Lake Ontario, the river begins in a maze of islands. This was a sacred place to the Indians who lived here. They called it the Garden of the Great Spirit. Astonished by the number of islands, a French explorer called it the Thousand Islands. The name stuck, even though there are nearly 2,000 islands here. Islands range from several miles in length to several feet. At one time, this was an exclusive playground for millionaires. Now it's a recreational mecca for anyone who likes boats and water. On the north side of the river, Ontario, Canada. On the south side, the state of New York. For 100 miles, the St. Lawrence River is the boundary between the United States and Canada. Extending the width of the continent, this boundary is the longest undefended border in the world. Another source of natural beauty, the rivers flowing into the St. Lawrence. The hills and high bluffs shouldering the St. Lawrence make a perfect setting for spectacular waterfalls. The hills and high bluffs are also a perfect setting for the downhill slopes of Mont Sainte-Anne. Because the river is so wide, bridges are scarce. There are several ferryboat crossings, downriver, north of Quebec City, it's ferryboats only. First, there were Indian canoes making small ripples on its broad surface. Then came the French and the men who christened it the St. Lawrence. Later on, English warships left their own imperial stamp on its coveted waters. Today, the commerce of many nations glides along its wide and gentle course. Its wide and gentle course to the sea.